You know, my imagination fails me. However, operations and maintenance is for floating offshore wind with a strong view on the Celtic Sea is the intention to go through for this lunchtime. First of all, I'll set out just for the basics of floating offshore in the Celtic Sea, a bit about the pipeline. I think most of you that can see from the names on the list are be well aware of that. So we don't need to dwell on it. Obviously, if you are struggling, get in touch with us. You know, we can point in the right direction if not. And then Craig will pick up in technical challenges and commercial barriers. That I say, Craig brings lots of huge experience from fixed offshore wind and O&M. But the challenge bringing that to bear and how to actually affect it for flow in the future will come down to the private sector, and that's very much the theme of this run of webinars and our program of work going forward. Is look, we can say what we think, we can bring the best knowledge to bear, which is what the Catapult do so well. But actually, when it comes to pass, we're looking for the private sector, you guys, to upscale, to get investment up front and start to really think around how you can collaborate with complementary companies and deliver this as a whole package. Of the many problems with that, the many challenges facing that, one is flows has got huge amounts of opportunity, but it's very short on purchase orders. So moving that forward is a major challenge. And we also mentioned our ITTs, which will be coming up as well. So very quickly, the corporate propaganda slide on KLTC Power. We are quite unusual. We are set up as a subsidiary under the Cornwall Council, and our role is to strategic regional development, sort of seeing flow coming in advance and being able to do as much development as if many, if not all of the developers. The view is to maximise economic benefit for the region, the UK. That's our goal. Secondarily, is to streamline that flow development, to accelerate it through programs like the zonal planning, which my colleague Neil leads on. That's important. Consenting, wrinkles, you know, we need it to be smooth and accelerated. There's also an element of getting the pacing right, because, you know, to affect that first aim of economic benefit, there's elements of getting our ducks in a row so that we can bring forward the local UK content. Infrastructure, ports and grid, they are really big, long lead items. You know, my colleagues in Tim and the team there, and Luke as well, they're working on that to really try and you know, understand what the ports are thinking, where the grid will go, and all that sort of stuff. So lots of stakeholders involved in that package, of course. Sustainable regional infrastructure, that's my bit. This is what this webinar is part of, is trying to help catalyse the private sector. And workforce development, that's Olaf is increasingly taking a lead role on that. That's my area as well, and it's intimately linked to the industry we'll have in the region as we go forward. So yeah, subsidiary in Cornwall Council, based in a hill in Pembrokeshire, with a team of 17. I think it might be 18 now. But... And this is the project. It's funded shared prosperity funding from the Levelling Up Fund, and essentially it's a strategic sector development piece of work. I won't go into detail there, but the slides will be available so you can read it at your leisure. And it's the aim is to really leverage a lot of the knowledge that have been gleaned by KLTC Power and Catapult, also other partners in the region, you know, Spexy, University of Plymouth, to keep pushing this, what we hope is an open door to make sure flow brings eco benefit to the region. So various work do contact if you'd like to know more about the shared prosperity Levelling funding. There is a bit of news recently as well, if you've been paying attention, about the Flow Commission, but that's moving as we go forward, and this work will underpin that. Okay, so specifically for this project and this sub-project and this webinar, is to really kind of get sort of bring everyone up to a level of knowledge on O&M for flow, but really start to have a poke at the idea of partnerships and quality. How are we going to deliver this is the big question. How's this going to happen? You know, if we're not careful, we will see those flow platforms be floated in and potentially floated out around Land's End, and we won't so much as sell a capacity. So how do we really start to think about our investment partnerships, of course, Authority of 14, and de-risking it intervention so we can really derive the benefits. So as I say, we've done concrete inter-array cables and A&M for the last couple of weeks. It's been a bit of a race, this one, and this one is today. The cross-cutting products and services, I think we're going to postpone. We've kind of topped out a little bit, so we're very likely to postpone that. There's a good idea in there around there's a lot to capture: marine operations, vessels. I'd be interested in your thoughts. I think a lot of it will flow from this webinar. So one of the logics is let's get some feedback on this webinar, then we'll return to that sort of stuff, because there's quite a lot of glue there, which is harder to capture in a snappy set of slides. The pipeline then, KLTC Flow, has had some amendments recently. But we're looking still at 1 gigawatt by about 2031 from the test and demo sites, so pre-commercial sites. These are really important. Hexagon's Twin Hub, I'm not sure if we've got any Hexagon on the line, but I know they've been on previous webinars, is approaching a key milestone, but they've got their CFD from AR4, so hopefully that will be...
Airbus.
Oh, hello. I'm not sure. Any questions in the message would be great. I'll be able to catch that. We'll bring them into the round later on. Erebus and Whitecross, Fuventus, Lear 1 and Lear 2, Valorous. These are all important test demo sites. Stepping stone projects, which we expect to see in AR6. AR5 was a bit of a damp squib. But these are really key. They're not necessarily, and this is a really key point, they're not necessarily indicative of the technology and the operational maintenance that will go forward in the longer term. That's really key. We hope that lessons will be drawn, of course, but they're not necessarily indicative. But look to the bigger numbers, the 4.5 gigawatts by 2035. That's an established target. Achieving it will be a challenge. The ambition, because there's lots of wind out there, out to 2045 is, I think, officially at sort of beyond the 20 gigawatts further. There was an indication someone might mention it of a 12 gigawatt that seems to have slipped into a government press release last week. So lots of people are calling for a bigger number there, but that's the one to keep our eyes on in terms of how can we really get our hands around the benefits. The challenge is huge. The scale of the actual platforms is immense. If anyone's not aware, picture yourself on the South Bank looking up at the Shard and sort of look across the London Eye and double that radius of there, and as much as the turbine plonked on. A bit short of the Shard, I understand it. But here's the thing, we don't necessarily know. The turbine choice isn't established. The platform foundation isn't established. There's a lot of unknowns there. It's so incrementally getting there, but there's a real first mover challenge. If we knew this, we could do that. The cables, the concrete, the steel. There's a lot of moving parts to fall into place, which again the test demos will inform. But what will they ultimately be? Because that's got huge implications for how and what we deliver from our region. So the challenge is huge, and we have to work collectively. Kelsey Cluster was set up, I think 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, to corral a regional voice. So these are the key players in there: Miniature Wales, Welsh Government, the Catapult, ourselves, and the Isles of Scilly LEP. There'll be more logos added to that in due course. It's a forum. It's kind of been a good way of corralling a lot of the knowledge. It works very closely with the Celtic Sea Developers Alliance, if anyone confused by that, which essentially represents the demand, the developers, and this is more the regional sort of supply approach. It happens also to be a fantastic set of resources now. So companies coming into this Calder can click on the link there. Julie's on the line, the Catapult are managing a lot of this, so there's a huge amount of resources to dig away at. Slightly conscious of time, but and also my repetition of slides the last few weeks, so apologies if I'm a little bit jaded. This is kind of, we've sort of seen this industry emerge on our doorstep and say, this is what we need to do. This is ambition. It's all great for net zero. This is a long laundry list of things that have to get done, and they are daunting, so there are some of these things, ports and grid. I would include workforce in it as well. That we have to pre-invest in. We have to start working up a solution. There's no question about that. We have to do that. But a lot of the others are sort of worryingly not necessarily rooted in the region. So there's not, well, what do we have to take on because they're regionally ground? O&M is a good example of that. It's geographically bound. But also, what do we want to take on? We can bleat from the sidelines and say, well, we want to do this and this. But actually, if we want to take on anchors and mooring, cables, operations and maintenance, then, from the region, from the UK, UK PLC, then and we need that upfront investment. We need to start thinking about scaling up, working together, and really presenting a solution to the industry ahead of time. Here's the thing: I don't. There's always a few developers on the line, so I'm always a little bit conscious of being a bit snippy. But the developers don't necessarily don't assume the developers understand what their problems are. They will farm it out to supply chain to come up with a solution. So we have to sort of break that loop a little bit. We want a proactive private sector that's coming up with solutions ahead of those products, because otherwise we'll always be a step behind. So that element of productivity is a really key theme, and hopefully with that we can switch it to opportunities. So these challenges, we may not be taking them all on. Let's be honest. Let's have a very clear assessment of the capabilities we have in the region, Turbines and towers. I know there's a lot of optimism around that. We're going to have that factory in the region? Don't know. Cables, that looks like a good anchoring mooring. Yeah, we know we've got the capability in the region. So what do we have to do to unlock that potential and scale it up rapidly? So where can we build from strengths? And here's the other big message I want to get across today is the export potential. So even if, obviously we hope it doesn't, but even if flow does end up floating in round Land's End, the export potential, if we can build the expertise in Cornwall, in Wales, the wider UK, in anchoring mooring, in O&M expertise, that's exportable to France, in Tana Island, America, Korea. So that's something that, given also in our region we are short on land, we are short on certain resources that we can't get through, it's hard to overcome. That's what we're aiming for. And this phrase, no regret activity, is coming through. I kind of sort of have this vague assumption that it's being mooted around and everyone understands it. Maybe not, but I think my interpretation of it is that flow's really big, and it offers this great opportunity to make lots of money down the line and derive lots of social economic benefits. So if we've got an investment decision pending, and ports are a good example of this, that is maybe not quite over the line, flow bulwarks it. So actually, let's just push that extra mile. It's a bit of confidence to back pocket, which I think is really important. The reason that certainly I live in Cornwall, so that's a rare commodity. We've not really had that sense of confidence that we can, if we build it, they'll come. So there's out that. Obviously, it's not easy said than done from me on my public sector perch. So capability. I'm going to just flag a couple of reports here. I think that if they're not if they don't put them in the chat, they'll be in the follow-up stuff. The supply chain capability analysis came out recently from OIC and Renewable UK. I think put that together. There are other example reports as well. What the clear message is that the capability is really high in the UK, but it's been lower than the sum of its parts, essentially. What Craig will speak to this, I'm sure, but lessons from Fixed is that the capability is there, but it's you look at that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and the real kind of juice is not at the top of the tree, if you like, for UK content. And that's important, not to be jingoistic about it. It's important because the flow down from that is, if you've got a EPCI in one country, guess what? They tend to go with contractors they know. It's just the way it is. So with flow, we have an opportunity to upturn that a little bit and take it on, and the capability is there. Where it isn't, we need to be honest about that. But what we do need to do is to understand the capacity, how we can scale up this challenge in with the right sort of timing to deliver that. I'm going to pass on to Craig shortly, but I did want to flag this one, which you might return to. Many of you looking at the list here will be well aware of it. It's the Kincard inflow development off Aberdeen. It was put in the water 4 years ago, I think, and it's a pretty major milestone for flow to put in place. When there probably it's a test and demo site, so there are a few problems emerged. It's hardly a surprise or any cause for alarm. But what was a cause for alarm, I would suggest, is that for lack of facilities, they felt they couldn't tow it back into Aberdeen. When it was apparently had to tow it back in, they couldn't tow it back into Aberdeen for lack of facilities at the port. Instead, they had to tow the first one, the third turbine, into Rotterdam, and then it happened again, and the second one, the Kin 02, went into Rotterdam as well. So that's quite a salutary lesson, quite lays down a challenge for, okay, as I said before, they're not necessarily indicative of how this will go, but if O&M for flow is going to be a tow to port scenario, how are we going to manage that? There's some big questions of ports that are that are at capacity pretty much as it stands, and will be very soon with their rollout. So there's a big salutary lesson there, which I'll leave there for now, but Craig will touch on, I'm sure, and we can return to it towards the end. So we do encourage your engagement. Oh, I'll come back to this slide at the end actually, but I'll whip through it very briefly. Sorry, Craig, I've got this one. Just to kind of try and capture what we're trying to get across with this program of work is essentially, look, we've got 4.5 gigawatts. This is the utopian dream over here. Lots of gigawatts of clean energy coming ashore, and we want it delivered with UK content and good green skills jobs, all that stuff, deriving benefit to our region and the UK. And the how bit is where we get a bit stuck. There's a bit of a loop there. As reports get generated, most of many of them are very, very good, but it doesn't necessarily connect to the capability. It sits over here both big and small companies who will ultimately, we hope, deliver it. So our attempt here is to try and make that link to these webinars, to the Prana platform I mentioned later, and the studies we'll commission through ITTs. In the process of that, we really want to see consortia formed. Those small companies with deep capability, maybe footprint in Cornwall, link up with, deeper pockets. Balance sheet is obviously, a really key factor here. Overcome the technical challenges, which if we can support, and the Catapult can support in identifying and articulating commercial barriers. I dropped that hint about the first purchase order is all important. Inward investment, that kind of thing. What interventions do we need to get across to then loop it back to ultimately deliver it? That's what we're trying to. That's the sort of the schematic which we're premising, which seems to be holding up. And we're nakedly interested in Cornwall, but we're very, very alert that it won't happen for Cornwall unless it happens for the rest of the UK. So it's positive impact on Cornwall, which is our owner's objective, but it's also for the wider UK as well. Right, with that, I shall pass on to Craig. Thank you all.
Thank you, Phil. So hello, my name is Craig Nichols. I am the Innovation Manager at Catapult's Operations and Maintenance Centre of Excellence in Grimsby. I'll give you a bit of background to my career. So with regards to floating offshore wind, this presentation, it's quite wordy, and I apologise for that. And that's really just to give me some pointers, because there's not a great deal of information, factual evidence of O&M for floating offshore wind, because it's a non-entity at the moment, and there's it's start of a journey. I have vast experience for operations and maintenance on fixed turbines. I've run projects in the UK, Europe, Taiwan. And I think for me, I can relate the Celtic Sea to my experiences in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, that was also fixed. So the challenge gets even greater. And I can elaborate on that during the presentation. What I won't do is, I won't do you a death by PowerPoint. I won't read everything out. I'll just go through some of the bullet points, and then that information's there. I'm not sure if that's available to share, Phil. If that's the case, I'm more than happy to do that. So yeah, next slide, please, Phil. So as you can see from the agenda, it's short and sharp. There's well, it's just short and sharp, and you'll see what I mean by that when we go through the presentation. So yeah, we'll go through a bit of self-Catapult marketing, the challenges that I feel are the potential challenges from my experience of delivering the projects that I've just described, the commercial and the technical bits. I'm not going to go too much into the financial commercial element. It's more what I see with the position of the Celtic Sea and the challenges commercially that would impact, but not so much the financial elements. And if you want me to elaborate on that later on, then I'm more than happy to do so. Next slide, please, Phil. So the offshore renewable energy catapult. So we are the UK's leading technology. I like to quote this, because this is the catapult is as a business. There's not enough people, companies that are aware of what we actually do. So any opportunity to showcase our facilities and our support is always taken on graciously. So our mission to accelerate the creation of growth and UK companies in the offshore renewable energy sector, and the sections there underneath are the key elements to what we provide. Next slide, please. So the Centre of Excellence runs under three key themes. So as the innovation manager, my role is to look outside of the renewable sector and see what opportunities are available that can add value to the sector. And the key parts, there's so many bits of possibilities that you could just be walking down the street and see something, and you think, actually, I saw a removal company the other day, and they had this self-leveling platform, taking some furniture into this house, and I thought to myself, actually, trying to do a transition from the TP into the entrance to the tower, that would could potentially save me a lot of time and effort if that product, that piece of kit was available. So my role is to see how I can add value by thinking out the box. And it comes under these three key headings of smarter, safer, and greener. So smarter is all about the data, the economic analysis. Safer, eliminating risk. The industry will never be in a position where technicians and personnel will be replaced by robots or autonomous support. But what we do need to do, the key bit for this is just to make the industry as safe as possible, and that is the key element. And greener, that's the way forward. Carbon footprint, very important to look at how we are at the vision for clean maritime, the use of hydrogen fueling. If you think about the amount of CTVs, SOVs that are operating at present and the amount of diesel they're burning, it becomes a bit of a hypocritical sort of approach to renewable energy. So we need to eliminate that and look towards making it a greener sector. Next slide, please, Phil. So, as I said, this is quite wordy. And again, the reason for that is it actually helps me to share the research that I've done more towards the Celtic Sea than floating. But then when you combine it, it becomes significantly challenging. The key bit here is well, I will read some of this out, obviously. So in relation to the infrastructure requirements, the substructure, the fixture requirements, and the assembly and OM, the opportunities, the concern we have with floating offshore wind and the Celtic Sea, the biggest commercial barrier or challenge is clearly the port infrastructure, the lack of laydown space, the demographics. It's for me that's a huge challenge, and I can relate to that with a project. I ran a campaign in Taiwan, sailing out of Hsinchu, and I actually didn't have space for the equipment that I needed to mobilize each day. The difficulty in trying to get the local government to support access to certain routes, it was a very, very difficult challenge, and there was a lot of red tape. There's a lot of negotiations before we could commence the campaign. I can't emphasize enough how important to get those ducks in line before you can successfully manage a campaign to the level that I did in Taiwan, which, in relation to floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea, would be the tip of the iceberg. So the challenge that we're talking about today is far greater. As it stands, from my research, there is not one port that is capable of being able to support the whole process from construction to delivery and then on to operations and maintenance going forward. The key bit here is the number and the scale of proposed floating projects. So the emphasis and the opportunity is the size of the prize is huge. However, the infrastructure needs to be well prepared and also be very well prepared for any contingencies. Next slide, please, Phil. So the Celtic Sea itself fits the bill perfectly for floating offshore wind. The parameter from fixed to floating is 60 meters, and any depth greater than 60 meters is prime area for floating offshore wind. That's the general rule. The issue with the Celtic Sea, from what I can see, is the current traffic and vessel activity that is in place, and there are some numbers later on the presentation. with regards to the floating offshore wind, and so if you're going to do a say a major component change on a static turbine, you just procure a jackup vessel. The processes are already it's been delivered for numerous amount of years. The process is in place. There's no real key challenge. The key challenge is being able to access the vessel. So it's reliable, it's available, and the experience is there. With regards to floating offshore wind, if you're going to have a major component change, then that tower needs to be towed back into port, purely because it's impractical and dangerous to do a component change on a floating structure. The amount of traffic regarding fishing activity and pleasure boats, etc. If you think about the influx of crew transfer vessels to access those turbines, that is going to be a significant amount of traffic of vessel movement, which I see as a very, very big challenge, and could cause a lot of issues with marine control. Again, it relates very, very similar to Taiwan, and the issues that I had to deal with are basically I had to visit the Coast Guard every day just to ensure that those relationships were built, so we could. Yes, it was a challenge. With that in mind, so as I said, towing the structure back to port is a challenge in itself, but trying to navigate through the traffic and get the access rights, etc., and the planning and organising will require a great deal of pre-planning and contingency planning. Next slide, please, Phil. So, with regards to what I just said there, just taken from a report from National Maritime. So, annually, vessels into Bristol, more than 2,500 years, 500 a year. Vessels using the traffic separation scheme, 9,000 a year, and vessels entering Milford Haven, it's more than 1,000 a year. That number is vast. Bearing in mind, I'm based in Grimsby. Grimsby is currently the busiest O&M port in the world, and the numbers that we deal with are minuscule compared to the numbers that we see on the screen there. Next slide, please, Phil. Just before I move on to the technical challenges, I've not gone into any depth of commercial challenge from a financial point of view for a few reasons. A, I'm not aware of them, and I don't want to discuss an element that I'm not confident in talking about. And O&M is the commercial procurement side is for me. I'm the operational delivery person. That is someone else's job role, and that has its own challenges as well. But they cross over quite significantly with the technical element, which I'll come to in a second. As you can see from the top sentence there, the challenges, the biggest concern that I would have in delivering a project in the Celtic Sea is the sea state and the adverse weather conditions. And going from fixed to floating, that I can only see that as being tenfold. In the Taiwanese Strait, there'd be just getting the technicians onto the turbine. You could end up being 3 days stand down purely because of the swell, the unforecasted weather. It would just turn like that. So in relation to that, you won't have the weather data history for the Celtic Sea that is available for numerous operational sites around the world. That is a key element for planning. However, even with that key element of planning, the fluctuation in the forecast from what I've researched with the Celtic Sea proves to be, for me, would be the biggest challenge for O&M. You have to get the technicians, the personnel, the vessels to the wind turbine to get it repaired. If you don't, then obviously it's just like servicing the car, it will break down. However, if it breaks down and you can't get there, the financial implications are huge. The key bits for me, so I've just put these down as bullet points: personnel and skill set. So as it stands, there's very limited personnel across various sectors, from marine control technicians, vessel operators, that have got the experience to describe what their business model will be, or their approach. It's alien because it's new. The weather risk is, as I've said, for me, that's the biggest concern, the strongest concern. And if you try and balance the weather risk and the planning, and you think about the cost of stand down on weather days, you really need to have a very significant allowance on your cost balance sheet in regards to the delivery of the project against the forecasted finance model. The contingency pot needs to match the potential delay. As I said earlier on, I'm not au fait with offshore floating winds, so these bits about mooring and anchors, I can only add my comments in relation to my experience. So that just adds a whole new dynamic to O&M. I've done ROV campaigns for potential cracks on structures and routine inspections, statutory inspections, where you're just on site. You might be using a diving company, you might be using remote operated vehicles. When something's bobbing about and it's chained down, you can just foresee how many different elements and challenges that will add to the O&M annual procedure. Next slide, please, Phil. So, accessibility. Static turbine, if you're going to crane something up, you just pull alongside, and as long as the weather's okay and the tidal state's okay, you crane it up. With a floating turbine, well, the challenge is quite obvious. The concern around the man riding lift inside the turbine on a static turbine, obviously movement's minimal. The breakdowns on those elevators is quite extensive, and I'm quite certain that number, that figure, the percentage of failure, will be dramatically increased because of the nature and the movement of a floating turbine, and that will definitely be a future challenge. If you can't use the lift, you can't get to the nacelle, and that scope of work is potentially stopped until that lift's fixed. Working at heights, so there's a whole new regulation at working at heights, which will fall under the regulations of the GWO qualifications. I've not been on a floating turbine, but I can see from my experience the need for for further training and to cover the the HSE legislations. The other bit that I would say is potentially difficult, bearing in mind the explosion of offshore wind and the fight to get the wind farms built, so the components will be under a huge strain for availability. Now, if you've got a wind farm that's operating and does have a mechanical failure, the availability and the lead time to get replacements, I can see being a challenge. My previous role to this one was I was a senior operations coordinator at Siemens Gamesa for Lindley and Dowsing. Now, that's a fixed turbine field, and it's an old turbine field, 13 years old. Now, even after 13 years, trying to get replacement components has been one of the most difficult challenges in my career, certainly in that role. And that's with components being available. When you've got this influx of new builds, it's pretty obvious to see that the availability will be minimal. The infrastructure, as I've said, of the local port, the vessel skills in the region, the bottlenecks, the delayed infrastructure through weather delays, through laydown times, through procurement, all are huge challenges in themselves. And I'm describing them in somewhat quite flippantly. Each one of those bullet points is a significant challenge, and that will rely solely on planning and organising the correct supply chain and having that great relationship. Next slide, please, Phil. So when it comes down to very adverse weather, you'll see SOVs, support operated vehicles, that have the technicians on at 2 weeks at a time, etc., depending on the transit time. I can't see that being actually a credible solution for O&M in the Celtic Sea, purely because of the availability of those vessels. So if you think about, bearing in mind, when you're doing an operation and maintenance campaign, certainly a service campaign, you will need to sail every day of the year, 365 days a year. And because of the situation and the nature of the weather, the tidal element of the Celtic Sea, and the downtime you're going to have, that'll have to be ramped up. So when they can sail, there'll be more vessels. So the availability of vessels, if you're an SOV, you'd have to go to deep water to get away from the adverse weather. It's going to be nearly impossible. Discuss spare parts and logistics. Element that I'm not aware of. Spoken to some of my colleagues that are experts in the Centre of Excellence for Floating Offshore Wind, and again, it's a bit of a non-entity. It's the array cables, it's the barriers and restrictions for vessels. So pre-construction, you're going to have a lot of potential impacts with the fishing industry, the relationships with those guys. Out of the Humber, we still to this day have daily challenges, and it's been proven that the wind farms can provide a stronger habitat and create a better, stronger support stroke opportunity for the fishing industry. Basically, there was a presumption that it would eliminate the fishing industry and the access and the lack of fishing. It would damage the industry. What's been proven is the fact that actually it's supported it, and more marine life are using the wind farms as a living base. It's a growing base. The other thing is, with regards to the nature of the location, the current protocols for emergency response and emergency procedures regarding access egress, they're going to have to be reviewed and signed off with a great. That's going to take a long time, certainly with the position of the Celtic Sea. Next slide, please, Phil. So just to summarise, and before I summarise, there might be a number of you sat there thinking, this chap doesn't really know a great deal about what he's talking about, and that's because that's correct. No one does regarding floating offshore wind. So I'm trying to link it as best I can to what I know. If this webinar was on static turbines, I could talk to you all day and give you the exact details. So from my point of view, sat in my shoes, I don't come across as an individual who's not really sure that he knows what he's talking about, and I'm just trying to amalgamate my the future challenge with what I'm fully aware of, and how that is. The challenges are going to be far greater. So just to summarise, port infrastructure and available space, that is a key bit. If your ducts aren't in line and the plans aren't in place, it's a showstopper, simple as that. The weather conditions, as I've described, the replacement products, that's huge. I can't tell you just how difficult and challenging that is with live static sites. EPR, emergency response, I've just talked about that. The other bit that is clearly a huge impact is the commercial traffic flow that's currently in place. Just lack of knowledge, lack of experience. If you're in a situation where you don't have the experience or knowledge on how to fix something or repair something or replace something, then you're going to have to come back and come back and come back, and that knowledge needs to be built up. That database of repair needs to take time to become proficient and effective. And the other key bit is, I struggled last week to secure a CTV for a 3-week campaign, and there are huge challenges with vessel procurement of all sizes, from jack-up vessels to support offshore vessels. But the biggest challenge at the moment is the availability for crew transfer vessels. And that's it from me, guys. Oh, forgive me. Sorry, the last slide. I forgot about that. Yes, if you need to get in touch, then that's our information. Oh, you're on mute, Phil.
Thank you, Craig. That was great. Yes, sorry, that was got an app in there at the end. We've got a little time left, so I think I'll just do a little piece on this. But I think if there's one thing to come out with basically, you know, Craig's a huge authority on this, and we like to think we know the Celtic Sea and flow, but the short answer is we don't know. Which I think we throw down as you know, there's so many unknowns here. I have to say, Craig added several technical elements which I was unaware of. So it lays down a huge challenge, which you know, as the previous slide says, how do we flip that into an opportunity? So vessel availability. Well, who's going to build them? Like, who's going to build them? So there's these real fundamental stuff, which again, flicking the challenge to an opportunity. In terms of how we'd solve this, just to give this slide a quick mention, and then we'll happily take any questions from the floor, the virtual floor. Is in the new year we'll be commissioning reports, studies. We're not necessarily interested in as you know, quasi-academic reports. That's not really the intention. We really want private sector consortia to come together and present solutions or part of a solution to how they might take on the O&M challenge. You know, it's right. One of the things I noted down was, look, a huge challenge here, commercial challenge, is how do you develop a scaled up solution to a problem to which full understanding is lacking. That can only, we sort of take our view, we take is that can only really come from the private sector that wants to do this job down the line. That's, you know, we can write reports, we can put out articulate as best we can, but that's how it will come. So this is a first step to that, to sort of stimulating that idea. So, you know, the solution has to be technically credible, it has to be investable. You don't have to tell us your inner workings or inner secrets, that's fine. But also what we really want to see is how is it going to demonstrate positive impact on Cornwall, on the UK. So hopefully that process will move it on a notch, if nothing else. So look at the new year for that. It's evolving all the time, and your input at this stage is also very welcome. I think with that, that's the slide I'm so in love with to remind you of. But I think with that we can move to questions, of which there's been a few offline. Oh, we got one just from Miles. That's great. So I don't know if you can see though the questions in the chat. Craig, if anyone wants to speak up, I'm all for that, because it helps. I think the
Craig and I. First thing I want to say is I have to be honest. I was actually quite nervous in presenting this, because I like to know the details inside out. And when I sort of put this forward to the team, they sort of said, no, you'll do it. So everyone's in the same boat with this. So yeah, it's really important for me to get that across. Right, sorry, chat. Right, just go to the top there. Last bit. Phil, it might be easier if you read the question out, because
I've got my own. So the brilliant thing about when it's unknown is that someone with any half-baked ideas can chip in like me. So I'm happy to lob in grenades. Some of the pre-submitted questions include SOVs or CTV, which is service operated.
Service operation vessel, yeah, that's right.
The bunny. Or CTV crew transfer vessels. So crew transfer being much smaller for zipping in crew back and forth, or larger scale vessels.
But the difference.
Have you any thoughts on that, Craig?
Sorry, it's basically the service operation. Because of the transit time, you'll have technicians that will stay on that vessel for 2 weeks at a time and then come home. Crew transfer vessels, they sail out daily and come back.
I think that's a really good one to start with, because another idea, another comment bubbling in the chat, which is definitely one for the webinar, is about decolonization of those vessels. I think we've got a couple of experts online, so do chip in, but that might be. I think the other question here is, these are big platforms. Are people going to live on them? You know, so is that fixed model approach, look to Craig, of a vessel going out sort of 2-3 week loop, I think, with the crew on board, is that going to change if you've got people living on there for 4 weeks and exchanging between turbines?
It's the first of all, when it comes down to decarbonisation, the Catapult are involved in a there's extensive work behind the scenes. We actually have a full department of clean maritime, and you saw that on the three sort of key themes of ours. There are numerous vessel operators and private owners really sort of leading the way for battery batterification, and it's certainly hydrogen is the key bit. The work around that is extensive, and actually we're seeing a significant support now. I think it's just come down to these operators stepping back and realizing that we need to move forward. So there is huge step changes in that. With regards to the vessel crew transfers and SOVs, it remains to be seen whether which would be the best, which approach would be the best solution. Crew transfer vessels are extremely expensive, CTVs are cheaper to run, etc., but you've got more traffic flow. That's a question you just can't answer until later on in the process.
Yeah. So I think also we're up against the commercial barrier. So I think Craig and I feel similarly, I'm sure, is that, you know, with public sector people trying to express a fundamental challenge which the private sector will have to take on, which is getting that investment in place and overcoming the first PO problem. And my understanding of green vessels is very much in that scope, is that until developers start placing orders, the innovation will remain innovation until it can scale up. So big challenges there. I did pick up on a pace another question which I've now lost, and I've seen a hand go up about, oh, here we go. Thank you, Joanne. What is anything kind of tech, maritime AI, weather forecasting? I'll quickly answer that. I know that that's definitely something to take to Catapult. They would love to answer that in depth, but my take on it is that it will be a significant component of it, but not the totality of it. I think the digital twin stuff is really interesting. University of Plymouth have got some really interesting things on the go here as well, but it will be a part of the solution, but not the whole solution, would be my thought. But Craig,
if I could just quickly interject there. So one thing that the Catapult are very proud of, so only a couple of months ago now, we launched the first 5G test beds for offshore wind. So this is an amazing so data transfer is huge. Imagine if you're on a turbine and actually some things happen and you're not sure what to do. You're in the middle of the sea, there's no one there, phone signals, you can't get in touch with them. However, with the platform we've put in place for Linden and Dowsing, you've got 5G network. That's the first in the world. You can have a visor on that's got AI capability with someone speaking to you, and they can see, you can be talked through it, even down to first aid, emergency response. That is a significant step change in the industry. I could talk to you all day.
That's all right. Well, I know we've got a company that's leading on that has got Cornish base. I'm not sure they're on the line, but the Trent Engineering have got ambition. I'm really keen to get to Miles's point. It's a really fundamental one. But Stephen, you've got your hand up and I neglected it. Stephen, do you have a question? You want to come on the line?
Yeah, gentlemen, thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. So I've done extensive studying of the ex-mariner, worked offshore for many years in the North Sea and other parts of the world, and done extensive modelling of the weather here, and absolutely agree with Craig's commentary. The weather here, it's actually rougher than the northern North Sea. You're open to the Atlantic. As a result of that, a couple of things. Really, really good point on emergency response. The weather that's caused your mooring line to break and you now want to go and recover your unit probably means that you wouldn't want to approach it with a vessel to try and grab the mooring lines. That is going to be a very tricky set of procedures to get through, undoubtedly. The second point about sharing of vessels, I think it'll be extremely challenging. And the reason is this: because the weather is so rough and the availability is so poor, that if you attempt to share vessels. Both developers will want it at the same time. So what I could see practically happening is, could there be a CTV ferry service or the like? Yes, almost certainly. Could there be blade factories, training centres that are all common? Yes, all the things that have no commercial benefit. But when it comes to, I need to get to the wind turbine, that will not be possible. And I think that you will need an SOV. CTVs from our modelling has such low reliability. You will take a very significant hit on your uptime. So just a commentary on certainly some of the things we've seen so far, but certainly echo the point that the weather here should not be underestimated.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the SOV it seems to be emerging from what we understand as well. Miles, I think that's quite nicely hands over to Miles. Do you want to speak up, Miles? Because there's a deep understanding of the ports, and the question about if there's a natural O&M hub in the Celtic Sea I think is a very pertinent one.
Yeah, morning, all. Mark Scott,
Miles.
Chief Executive Falmouth Harbour. So thank you for letting me come in. Yeah, just my point really is obviously what's often not, and some really good points made. So I think that's a more detail I've seen for some time in some presentations around how much you're going to manage and handle these devices going forward. Obviously, as a harbour, and for good or bad, being one of the closest to some of these arrays, then when it goes wrong, then we're likely to be the place where shelter is sought more than likely. And there was a lot of work to be done around how they're going to be managed in terms of the government indemnity, how ports are going to accept those. Most ports will not accept them if they're in a damaged state, and like any other ship, they would want reassurances from government and SOSREP in terms of receiving those devices and vessels. So I think that's a really interesting point. I have mentioned it to the Secretary of State representative around wreck recovery and how we're going to deal with devices when damaged. And I think there's quite a lot of work to be done in how that's going to be done. I think it needs some sort of government indemnity to cover the cost of those devices to get them safe in the first instance and then take it from there. But that could be a huge issue. There could be many devices damaged in a particular storm. So that's one issue. And also some other fundamentals. When they're in good state, how do we handle them? How do we pilot them? How do we charge for them? How do we manage them? How do we temporary and long-term anchor them in ports, particularly when dealing with wet storage? And I think there's a lot to be done in that. Obviously, we're up for that conversation as a harbour. I'm no doubt Falmouth will play a part of the role. And there's such a big cake. I don't think we need to argue around how much the biggest the slice is. We just need to work together on the procedures and what we're going to do around handling these vessels, both in good times when they're in good condition, but also probably more critical is how we're going to deal with it when it goes wrong. So again, some really good points made in the presentation. I appreciate that. I think there's much more detail than it seems sometimes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Brilliant. As ever with these webinars, we feel we're articulating the problem as best we can, but people who will come up with the solutions down the line are, sort of champing at the bit. So that conversations offline, this is what we want to do. Actually, Miles, while I've got you, can I push you a little bit on a question about if there's a single hub for Celtic Sea flow O&M? I think I was very taken with the trip recently to Grimsby and up at Dogger Bank as well, is that it's to protect the North Sea, because it's less protected, should we say? So do we have to consider that? Is there going to be O&M goes up to Milford Haven, the wind blows, turns around, that we have to consider it in Falmouth and elsewhere? Have you kind of any comment on that, or is that you mentioned about the multi-port approach? But
yeah, I think if you know me well, you'll say, I'm constantly campaigning for a collaborative approach to multiple port solutions, and I think that's what we need. Certain weather would determine that. What I said in terms of safe haven, then I think depending on the weather conditions, then certain ports can be better placed. So we need multiple locations to do this. And I think in terms of the likely volume is very significant. I think there will be primary sea. I think some sort of leading ports that probably might take a lot of the sort of activity because they're well placed to do so. Obviously, Falmouth is one of the many others along the south coast are as well. And also the Pembrokeshire coast as well in terms of that. So I think that my campaign is for a southern UK collaborative approach. I think the Pembrokeshire coast is working really well, and obviously this whole Celtic fringe therefore could work together. But I think the two areas of shelter for the predominant winds, the south coast of England and the parts of the Pembrokeshire coast, are going to be key to get those working together. But absolutely, we need to work with other ports. We can provide a very significant. We've got the geography of the Lizard Peninsula assisting us. But there are other options along the south coast. So yeah, definitely collaborative, not one port solution.
No, agreed.
Brilliant, thank you, Miles. I think the other thing to chuck in here as well is also the temporal element, is because we look at the map, but actually this is going to be a long process of installing an assembly. So some ports might take one role, in 2035, and then it changes as we go. I know Appledore have got aspirations for O&M, again CTV SOV question there, and Clean Maritime, their ambitions are really impressive. But also I think I'd also chuck in as well one of the few bits of O&M for Flow in the Celtic Sea done to date has been our Flydar buoy, which we towed into Padstow. which is not really anyone else thinking. So that displacement effect, I think, is probably keen to bear in mind. Is if we've got the bigger ports, Port Talbot, Falmouth at capacity, how does that affect the smaller ports?
Sorry, I just come in on that. And sorry, I was really talking about the dynamic around significant shelter and handling devices. Clearly, many of the ports have different functions. Of course, you probably wouldn't take a device to Padstow or to maybe in really bad conditions for a safe haven. But I think that's what it is, very broad around these certain tasks that are required. So yeah, it certainly will go a lot further than some of the ports of shelter and haven.
Great, we've got a couple of minutes left. I think I'm not sure we answered all the questions, but this is such a big one. It's such an open one. I urge you to kind of go away and think, that knotty question of, two knotty questions of how we're going to develop a scalable solution for a problem we don't fully understand. At least be rest assured that no one seems to understand it otherwise. So, and also the commercial barriers, which are going to be really significant. Craig, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just that I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join. As I said, it's possibly one of the most difficult subjects to give answer to, but it's one of the best subjects to have a debate stroke conversation. And the comments I'm hearing, it sounds like there's this real sort of movement and step change going forward. The collaboration word is what I wanted to hear. That is the key to success, especially from the infrastructure of the ports. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, everybody. Do get in touch with us, or we'll be sending out these slides and the recordings, of course, as well. One last, I did say I'd return back to the Kincard Inn, so I'd urge you to Google that one. It is a salutary lesson. I think it's been described in pretty harsh terms. I think Tim Pick as well, and the Crown State, is that the lesson there was O&M was so hard they towed it back to Rotterdam. Now, if we're to land benefits for O&M in the longer term, the nice thing about O&M, I don't think so specifically, is that there's a long tail of benefits to which the region can derive because it's geographically bound. That is really key. That's not going to happen if they're towed back to Rotterdam. So how do we get on top of that and make the best of it? So that's a thought to land on. Any other questions? We've got a minute or so, but I'm happy to send you on your way to think about these things and come back with a proposal to ITTs. Thumbs up going up. Thank you all. There's a nice mix as ever. I think there are a couple of developers lurking. I might pick you up afterwards. So what we got wrong. But I think, again, this is a solution which needs a problem needs a solution. So it's not easy. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody. I think we'll wrap it up.
Brilliant.
1 o'clock on the dot.
I will need to go on to another call. So otherwise, I'd be happy to stay.
No worries.
Cheers, guys.
I'll stay on the line for a bit if anyone's got some burning offline questions. But thank you all, and we'll see you at some point in the new year. I think we'll do something else. Take care. Bye-bye.